Great, thanks, Senator. I think you put your finger on the fact that the overclassification has even stopped the Congress to be able to perform its functions the way it should, is oversight in a variety of ways. The last person on the panel will be Ben Powell. Ben sits on the Public Interest Declassification Board, so he's deeply concerned about these issues. I'll let him make a few months. I know he's read the proposed legislation and give you some thoughts and reflections about that.
Yeah, thanks, Harvey. I'll just be very short so we can get to any questions. The Public Interest Declassification Board has written to the President that our classification and declassification system is in a state of crisis. We've written 5 reports since 2009 on this, and in June of 2020 put out a report on modernization suggestions for the digital age. We were heartened to see that many of those, I hope, had some contribution to the impressive legislation that was unveiled. Many examples, and we all know them. Senator Rounds gave important ones related to artificial intelligence. Chairman Warner mentioned space in his remarks, and I'll just note, when you have the then Vice Chairman of the Air Force saying that the overclassification in the Department of Defense is ridiculous, unbelievably ridiculous, that tells you something about where our system stands and the importance of this legislation. All of the flaws that Chairman Warner and Senator Rounds mentioned, of course, are demonstrated in what the DoD has said about what's going on in space programs in terms of cost, in terms of duplication of effort, and in terms of, frankly, harming our national security and our ability to share information with important partners, both domestically and internationally. I'll just finally say we're greatly encouraged by this legislation. This is not a glamorous topic, but it is a vitally important one to the infrastructure and plumbing that underlies our national security. The community, both the intelligence community, the defense community, the energy department, and others, of course, are going to need resources, personnel, and frankly, commitment if they're going to address this. So I would just say this is an incredibly important piece of legislation, and we're greatly encouraged to see it unveiled.
Great. I'll ask the first question. One of the issues when one went through the 2 proposed bills is the number of entities that are involved in coordinating the process that you guys have laid out. And part of that is also the amount of funding that you've allocated. And as Ben sort of raised that funding issue, I think we spend billions of dollars in classifications and very little on the declassification. So are you thinking of weighting that? Is that going to be something that's going to be addressed in the future? What is your sense about how that will be coordinated, Senator?
Well, I think you're right. I think we've seen, I think the number, to call this
5
million.
5 million.
Yeah.
Which is not going to be enough. But the overall cost of classification, wasn't it 18 billion?
Depending how you do it, coordinating, it's billions and billions of dollars.
Right, we've seen an 18 billion on it.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, at the end of the day, the funding needs are going to be bigger than we laid out, but we didn't want to. You know, the art of sausage making is we didn't want to scare people away with the price tag on the front end, and if we can do if we can dramatically cut back, I think there are savings. I do think one of the notional proposals we've got of this almost quasi taxation regime within an agency that would and again, the devil will be in the details on how we get that. If it were to get through, how it gets implemented, but that could actually redirect some of the funds to make sure that on the declassification.
Yeah, just one thought on that also. The 5 begins it, but then after that it's funds as may be needed. But along with that, let me just share with you, just to get them to move off dead center is critical. The National Geospatial Intel Organization, okay, the NGA, they last in a couple of years ago, what they found out was, anybody here serve in Afghanistan? How many Afghan vets we got here? Got a few? Okay. Afghan vets found out, they're going to smile on this one here. Afghan vets found out that when they got to Afghanistan, they needed overhead. They needed to be able to see the pictures of what's going on the ground. These folks here, they have spectacular abilities to show things, but it is so good they really didn't want the world to know how good their capabilities were, so they weren't sharing the pictures they were taking in Afghanistan. So what our vets have to do? They went out to the commercial market and bought commercially. What did the NGA figure out? They figured out that if they were going to survive, that they better be able to at least take these items and declassify them. Well, they've got 65 different guidebooks when it comes to classifications. It only took them 5 months to fix the problem. That was it. So this is a doable deal, and it can be made more efficient, and it's more than just the costs involved in classifying. It is, once again, the lost opportunity that we have right now that we are not assessing when we talk about how much it costs to declassify. $5 million, think about what it means just in terms of the ability to have those capabilities if you're fighting in Afghanistan and you need to see where the enemy is, and you got to buy a commercial picture or to use commercial access rather than to have the finest that's out there, because we really don't want anybody to know how good we really are. Those are the decision things that we have to address here.
And to echo what Mike just said is, we also had a problem in Afghanistan of sharing with our partners, which, their troops as well.
Right.
We have done better, and just suffice it to say that the quality of sharing in terms of the Ukraine conflict is better. But Mike's dead on that.
We were going to have Robert Cardillo, who was,
Yes.
director of NGA, and we have some NGA members here, and they went down from, I think, 56 or 65 classification guides to 2. But he couldn't get here because he's declassifying more documents. So
Right.
as a result, he couldn't get here.